welcome to a brand new episode of Seize the Moment podcast. And today we have a very special guest. We have Dr. Rama Chellappa. He's a pioneering researcher and inventor in the fields of artificial intelligence, computer vision, and machine learning. He's a Bloomberg Distinguished Professor in electrical, computer, and biomedical engineering. And he's also a member of the Johns Hopkins Center for Imaging Science, the Center for Language and Speech Processing, and the Malone Center for Engineering and Healthcare. He's also a fellow association. He's a fellow of the Association for the Advancement of Artificial Intelligence, the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, and the National Academy of Inventors. Dr. Chellappa holds 8 patents. He's the recipient of IEEE's 2020 Jack S. Kilby Signal Processing Award and the 2012 KS Fu Prize from the International Association of Pattern Recognition. And his work has been featured by the Associated Press, the BBC, and the New Yorker. And his new book, available now, is called Can We Trust AI? Welcome, Rama. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me on your show.
Absolutely. So before we start, I want to really quickly give a shout out to someone special. So our friend Suleiman Jenkins, who works at Johns Hopkins, who's the director of academic programs in the Institute of Nanobiotechnology there. He was actually super excited when he heard that we had you on. So, I mean, you guys are obviously kind of fellow colleagues over there. So we wanted to give him a shout out. He was the author of Life is Raw, the autobiography of Napoleon. So really cool stuff. And it's interesting how it's kind of such a small world. So before we begin, I also want to start off with a quote from the book that we're about to discuss, and then obviously we're going to get into the conversation about it. So, quote unquote, computer scientists who worked on AI in the 1960s and 70s dreamed of having their programs beat a human chess champion. Finally happened in 1996. Automatically translate Russian documents or solve complex mathematical puzzles and theorems. At Purdue, I began working on pattern recognition and image processing, which led to a career path combining artificial intelligence with sensors, cameras, and microphones that would ultimately allow a computer to see, which is pretty incredible. Today, pattern recognition enables computers to search through enormous sets of data to connect the dots on otherwise impossible to perceive patterns that could be useful in real-world applications, perhaps identifying images of people and objects or understanding voice instructions. These tasks are now commonplace. Just think of Apple's Siri or Amazon's Alexa personal assistants, Google's Translate app, or even the ubiquitous automated speed cameras that capture the license plate number from a fast-moving car. During my years as an undergraduate student, these applications existed only as science fiction. So amazing. I mean, when I think about artificial intelligence, I think maybe because I'm a little bit backwards here, I just tend to think about robots. And that's, I think about like the robot in Rocky 3, which is like sort of talking to Rocky and just, kind of like a friend. And I'm like, oh, wow, holy shit. If this is as advanced as modern technology is going to get, it's pretty incredible. So that's kind of like where my mind is in terms of AI. I just literally think of the robot in Rocky 3, but it's obviously a little
Or
bit
the Terminator.
Or the Terminator, right? So
I was just waiting for it to come.
right. But and it's obviously a little bit more complex than that. And sort of the way that we now see modern technology, obviously outside of the caricatures, is essentially through algorithms and the way, social media companies like, let's say, Facebook compile data. So can we begin a little bit about that? And especially when we talk about how it influences our lives and what we think about when we, let's say we think about AI on a daily basis and how it affects us.
I think AI and robots have been there since the mid-70s. In fact, Stanford had a couple of robots built. One of them was called Shaky because it's a big one. It was kind of shaking as it moved and so forth. And the Hollywood has created all sorts of things with robots. iRobot is a great example. And I understand even earlier than that, there have been these kinds of movies. Even in the silent movie era, there have been, because it's kind of fascinating, right? It's something that's bigger than us can happen and so forth, and something more intelligent than us can happen. And what would that be? And would it be good? Would it be devastating to our civilization, the way of life, and so forth? About robots, I actually did a show with Mr. Gary Witta. It's called Hopkins at Home. He co-wrote the script for Rogue One, the Star Wars story. Actually, yesterday it was on my TV. I've seen it a few times, but I never get tired of it. I saw it again. And so the title of our conversation was Imagination, AI, Imagination and Reality. I said, Gary, you represent imagination. I represent reality, because imagination is needed, right? Jules Verne imagined a lot of things, and it's amazing how much he imagined, and that probably motivated people. Maybe we can build something like that, right? So, so that's how robot naturally comes to mind when you talk about AI. But there are so many other applications. And I'm often asked, is AI already here with us? I said there are various forms of AI, the recommender systems. Once I see a movie on Netflix, oh, it says you also may like to see all these other movies. Or once I buy a book in Amazon, for example, if you order my book in Amazon, it'll give suggestions about competing books. I hope they just say again, buy more of Rama's book. I would like that. I need to change that software a little bit. So it is there. Alexa, as you mentioned, and Siri conversations. And now big companies have built super, super big language models, right? So AI is very much there. So AI is kind of there in many applications. For example, we just finished a project where, given a picture, we can geolocate it very well. So basically, we feed the machine various places and kind of say, this is where the latitude and longitude are, et cetera, et cetera. When we give a fresh image, it kind of comes pretty close. Not always, but with the reasonable accuracy, right? So it is able to do that. So AI is also able to predict a few things by mining data. So I think wherever there is data, now you can assume there will be some AI. That is the big change. In the early years, we were big on domain knowledge. We will, for example, chess, there is a domain knowledge. What are the valid moves and so on. But AI is able to beat human because it can look ahead. There is an explosion of possible things, right? Next, you can do this many moves. And then on that, you can build, et cetera, and computer can see way ahead. And humans, we can probably see, I don't know, best of people can see 6 or 8 moves and so on. So it is clear in those kinds of situations, AI will be good. But more and more, we are looking into AI in medicine. And as I said, that's why I came to Hopkins. And there is a lot to be done here. So AI is kind of everywhere. So wherever there is data, you can say AI is there right now, because we have moved to data-driven AI to a large extent. We started up as a domain-driven AI. Now we are a data-driven AI.
Interesting. I'm curious, actually. I mean, I have read the book, but definitely like to bring this up. How has AI helped health in the sense that, for example, maybe in relation to maybe diagnosing patients or helping doctors to maybe deal with the COVID pandemic?
Yeah. No, there is a great example in my book. I discussed the work of one of my colleagues, Professor Suchi Saria, and she has used AI and machine learning to understand sepsis, and detect it. Apparently, that is sometimes hard even for doctors. And then, this is being experimented with at some hospitals and so on. So what will happen with AI and medicine is this. We have electronic health records, right? I mean, you take a lab, take a blood test, a whole bunch of numbers come. The diagnostic images sometimes, MRI, CT, X-ray, and even natural language conversations between the physician and the patient. All of this can be kept in one place because it all corresponds to one person, which will lead to personalized medicine. Instead of you being a part of a group, now you are you as far as AI and medicine is concerned. So because every one of us is built slightly differently, right? So, so it can continuously process that data and look for any issues and be a guide, just like physician assistant is there, who's also trained, there will be an AI assistant that the doctor can go to and figure out is something they have missed. Because my doctor, still has 2 big. I've been seeing him since 1992. He has 2 big folders, all my reports and everything. AI can kind of look at all of them in a continuous way, in an incremental way, and kind of update the status of where I am and so forth. So we have a 5-year project at Hopkins. I'm working with the world-renowned geriatric physicians, Dr. Jeremy Walston and Dr. Peter Aberdeen. The goal of this effort is to encourage research, promote research, conduct research, supervise research that will explore the role of AI and technology for healthy aging. You know, as we, in fact, this is what I like to say. Finally, I'm doing some research that may actually help me down the line. I'm 69 years old, right?
Wow.
So what I'm saying is that we are trying to look at detecting Alzheimer's, detecting dementia, and providing alerts if the person, you know, has a tendency to fall prevention. You can use wearable sensors and so on. These are things that will happen. You mentioned robots to begin with. There's a company that we are interacting with, you know, builds robots that will visit nursing homes that have late stage dementia patients. And during COVID time, they'll take an iPad and it will bring, you know, people, family, and things like that. Just for that time, that patient's life is somewhat better, right? Late stage dementia, they can't speak and they're kind of sitting there, you know. So we hope to see more and more robot interactions in that space. We can have a robot, you know, be a friend to an elderly person, remind medications, remind the exercise protocols, and even Apple Fitbit, Watch says, "Hey, you guys, you're sitting on the couch for too long. Maybe you should get up and walk," right? So those are all good things, because if you get that kind of a nudge, you will do that.
Right.
Otherwise, you know, that's where AI is going. It's going to be there in the background, and it'll be kind of trying to help us. It'll make things better for us. That's the optimistic view that I have about AI.
What would be the pessimistic view, at least in regards to health? Does it have anything to do with how well encrypted, protected health information is, and in regards to HIPAA laws and
Right.
so
And
on?
what about even misdiagnosis?
Oh yeah. Okay. This is where definitely. Let me take the first question first. In fact, I think health sector can help the non-health AI about privacy and things like that. You know, you mentioned HIPAA and so on. At Hopkins, you know, my computers are in the engineering place, and the actual medical data is in the medical place. So it's not easy for me to get. I have to be embedded in that space. As a professor, you know, biomedical engineering and School of Medicine, we keep computers there, everything. So medical field has figured out how to protect your data. Unless you authorize, Leon, Alex, others cannot see your medical data in theory, right? I mean, somebody can hack into something and get access to it, but in theory, so they have that. I think AI, non-health AI folks can learn from that. Misdiagnosis. Yes, we worry about it, right? So it is no longer, I think AI versus human is Hollywood stuff. For me, AI and human is the real stuff. Okay, I like to joke. I hope this doesn't offend anyone. I also like Mr. Rogers, and I used to watch Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood with my children. If you make a movie all about that, it's not going to make a lot of money. Whereas if you make a movie robot going and destroying things, you know, people would go and see it. So Hollywood, you know, man versus AI and Terminator and all that stuff. But in reality, it's going to be always AI plus human. Okay, that's how I see it. And that is a place where we need more interaction. Let me give an example. And again, as a professor, I have a tendency to talk without break. Please tell me, Rama, enough.
You got it.
Enough.
No, please.
We move to the next question or something like that.
Go for it.
Let's assume, you know, we have Tesla. Okay, is it fully automated yet? And I don't have a Tesla, but I know it has all the other features, right? It has the features for providing alerts when you have cars on the adjacent lanes. Even entry-level cars have that, right? So fully automation, you know, is a goal, but not everybody is going to be in a fully automated Tesla. I still like to drive my car. I mean, it has all these features, but I just pump gas. Maybe I'll move to electric, but I'm not into fully automated version. So if I am on the freeway, and then if the fully automated car is also on the freeway, not just me and the other car, whole bunch of them. So what you are going to talk about is that whole bunch of AI cars and some amount of non-AI cars have to be on the freeway driving at 65 miles an hour and crisscrossing lanes and things like that. That means it's a huge problem, human AI interaction, right? As humans, you can view them as non-fully automated car. People and AI is a fully automated car people. So
Sure.
you have to network. AI has to know where everybody else is, and it has to be networked, and it's a very fast pacing move. So there again, I wouldn't go human versus AI. I would say how the humans and the AI working together. So that is where. So misdiagnosis can be decreased if the humans and the doctors work together. So I consider it as a triplet: patient, AI, and the physician.
Right.
Before, we trusted the physician completely, right? We come because he or she is very well trained, educated, and we have to go with that.
Yeah.
Despite that, sometimes errors happen.
And
Okay.
by the way, and to interrupt you here,
Yeah.
I would even add what's so interesting is about doctors' misdiagnoses. Often people think that the accuracy rate is something like in the 90s, something like 95, 99. They think they go to a physician, that person is an expert. It's actually much worse than that, man. Like doctors' misdiagnoses are actually incredibly high. I was actually once misdiagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which was insane. So I had no symptoms of it, like literally none. The doctor looks at the blood test and she misread the results. And she looked at the blood test. She's like, oh my God, you have type 1 diabetes. No follow-up questions, no anything. And of course, I'm horrified by this. I'm like, oh my God, I have type 1 diabetes. And I would think something like an AI system could have probably corrected her in that moment.
Yes, it's possible, and that's what we want to, because humans make errors. It is a thing. I have to be careful when I discuss doctors. My 2 children are doctors. So they work very hard and they try to do their best and so forth. Human error is possible. What do we say? To error is human, right? AI can make mistakes too. If AI has been fed, somewhat poisoned data, incorrect data, and so forth, it may fail. The more interesting thing with AI is if I use the data from one hospital or one pathology lab and train it, when it goes to the other, process the data from another pathology lab, the performance goes down because different labs train their samples differently. The pictures look a little different. This is a big challenge for AI. It's called domain shift. In fact, Professor Saria, who I mentioned before, has an article in one of the leading journals how she has witnessed this when her algorithm, or how she has not her algorithm, but an existing algorithm, when you take for sepsis detection, when you take it to different hospitals, the performance is different, right?
Oh, very. So, can I ask a question? So we had on. So he was a doctor of of oncology. So we had on Mikhail Sekaras on, and so he told us that essentially, as we were talking about oncology and different types of cancer diagnoses, that essentially doctors sometimes it's not that they're wrong per se, but they disagree on particular tumor growths. So whereas one doctor can see a tumor and would say, over let's say a year period, it looks pretty stable. Another doctor could say, no, it's grown X amount. So can AI help with that?
Yes, AI will hopefully, assuming it's properly trained.
Right.
That is right, because we are still doing mostly data, and maybe in the medicine, I think more domain needs to be introduced in the AI algorithm, and eventually it will happen. Yes, it will give its opinion, definitely, which will make the doctors take a pause and kind of, check their data and things like that. Definitely. My dad, when he was in the low 50s, his prostate cancer was misdiagnosed.
Wow.
They thought it was TB, it was this, they were giving the wrong medicine, and he passed away in a few years. And it's unfortunate, it happens, but AI would provide the additional intelligence needed to come, because AI can look at the data, it remembers the data over a long time. It can do multidimensional data analysis. Humans are good at 2 or 3 dimensions. So I think that is why whenever people come to me, will AI is going to take us over and rule us? I say, no, AI will work with us. We will work with AI. We'll make things better. That's how we have to look at it.
I totally agree with that. I think it's actually important that we integrate with AI. I mean, the processing power, right? The amount of data the amount of variables that AI can process.
Yes.
And also, who knows? I mean, this may sound like futurism, but if maybe one day we have, let's say, generally intelligent AI, what are the possibilities there?
Conscious AI.
You never know. Imagine an AI with creativity, right? What sort of?
We already have that. AIs can write novels. It's really wild.
Okay, but yes, that's true.
Yes. Yeah. I can give you some interest, because this comes up all the time. Specific AI, general AI. We now even have a software that can prepare a paper that looks like a very technical paper in my field in computer vision. A few years ago, somebody did that as a prank.
Mhm.
Now again, somebody did that, and it
Mhm.
even was accepted for the conference. The reviewers
Wow.
missed it because it looked, people cannot. We have a lot of papers to review. Our conferences are getting 10,000 papers.
Mhm.
So the authors were, oh, look what we have done. AI is writing a paper, but there is no real paper. I mean, that is based on science. I mean, what happens is this is more like a misinformation paper. Some of
Right.
us believe that AI can generate, some things in that space. But as long as the current AI is just based on the data that has been collected,
Mhm.
all it can do is give things within that space. People ask me, can AI do something so weird that we should be afraid of? I said, if it is purely data-driven AI, anything it says will be still somewhat constrained within what it has been given. It cannot, because if you think something is weird, that weird cannot be function of what is existing now, because then we won't call it weird. What do we call it a weird? What do we call it as a something? Oh my God, we never imagined that. That we never imagined that cannot be a function of what we have already known. Okay, so that
Right.
and what all AI does when it does the data is just know what it has seen all the data. It summarizes into certain number of parameters, so it can predict and so forth. It's like, it's not a great analogy, but I like to tell my students, an apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. Everybody understands that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You have an apple tree, it kind of falls in the neighborhood. So a deep learning machine can only predict things that are kind of within that neighborhood of where it has seen. As another example, if you have a Google access now, go to thispersondoesnotexist.com. Maybe you
Mhm.
have seen it. If you have a laptop, beautiful face. It really beautiful. You will think that, my God, there is a person like that, such natural, face. So even I thought, oh my God, it's actually producing something, so, nothing like training data set. But somebody did a analysis and said, no, 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 it's a beautiful face, all right. Maybe there is no person like that, but it's not totally different from the existing data set from where it has been trained. There is a little bit of this person, a little bit of that person, a little bit of that person. In our mind, we cannot put together.
Right.
Right. Whereas, you can associate, you can kind of disassemble the new phase and say, hey, it's the epsilon of that phase, the delta of this phase, et cetera, et cetera. So what I'm saying is, although the new phase, there may not be a person like that, but that still is in the same neighborhood as the faces that it has been trained on. That's why I tell people, don't worry about AI going crazy, at least as it is being done now. Okay.
Yeah.
So that is but let's worry about how to make AI better. It has challenges, like I told you, the domain shift, or somebody can hack into it because it's still a software. People hack your cell phones, people hack our computers. So somebody can hack our AI systems and make the Tesla go left if you want it to go right. It's possible. But
Mhm.
so those are things we should be concerned about. With AI is not at a place where it's going to do something really weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, sorry, in regards to the domain shifts,
Mm.
how far away do you think we are from perhaps being able to, I don't know, develop AI to the point where it can integrate these different domains and come up with some sort of something approaching an accurate, maybe emergent?
Yeah. I think we have known this problem from the 50s, 60s when we do
Yeah.
pattern recognition, because pattern recognition was also using data, and then we had to make sure if it looks at data that it has not seen before, it does not fall apart. For example, Alexa, right? They train it, they send it to your home. They've not heard you speak before and so forth, but still it
Yeah.
has to work. But slowly they can also fine tune to your voice and your style of speaking and so forth. So we are still working on it. Domain adaptation, about 12, 15 years been an active area, and it is seen as an important area. And we are providing methods for managing the shift. So for example, if you give me data from 2 pathology labs, then I can kind of say, these guys' data is slightly different. I need to tell the network how to manage that difference and then still learn well, so it works on both data sets. So this is what we call as reducing the domain shift. But suppose if I want my AI to work in Mars, I have not been there yet. There are data available from the Mars rover, but that's a totally different domain. It's called domain generalization. So then what we do is we will learn as much as possible, about planet, what happens in planet Earth, or what happens in Moon, and so forth. So make it ready when it sees a totally new thing, it won't fall apart. So these are still emerging themes. And, if the generalization is very good, all it says is that a Tesla that runs well in Phoenix will also do well in New York, in Mumbai, and Hong Kong. Hopefully, right? I mean, it has to do well for it to sell at other places. So it's a concern, and people are working a lot on that. Every conference has papers on them and so forth. Yes.
And then, yeah, so touching on a little bit about the dark side of all of this. So interestingly, what happens with me, and I know this is going to seem a little bit of a shift. So as a psychotherapist, which, for our listeners, which is what I do for a living, I often get people who don't really want to interact with me because I think I know more about them than they would want me to know. So the thinking is that as long as they meet me and they give me a few data points, they think that, oh, I'm going to be able to sort of peek into their minds. So this happens a lot on dates or before I even go on dates, where women will say something, well, I don't want to tell you that because I feel like you're going to analyze me, even though, I mean, yes, I am, but it's not the biggest deal in the world. So what's interesting about that is that I'm just a human. I have very little data. So I don't have a million sort of pieces or data points to go off of. But then when you have something like AI, which, so, I'm already frightening in this kind of respect. But then you have something like AI. And I think we're all sort of terrified about something like Facebook knowing us like too well, even in some ways better than we know ourselves. And there have been these stories where essentially you go on social media, whether Facebook, Twitter, or whatever, and you get some sort of recommendation, and you think to yourself, like, wait, how did they know that I would want something like that? And you kind of look at it and you're like, wait, actually, I kind of do like this. That's an interesting recommendation. So that's kind of scary that in some ways that, again, I'm just a person, and then people don't want me to know them better than they kind of know themselves. And can you imagine, and I'm sure you obviously can, but, for kind of people out there, can you imagine what it's like having an actual system knowing you better than you know yourself? And even a system, even in some ways, very spooky, being able to predict your behavior or being able to predict what you like based on very limited data. So can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, it's a very, very good question. I mentioned, Gary Witta, who I did this talk with, and he says, Rama, I was just casually discussing buying mattresses in my house. Next time I log into my machine, I'm getting all these advertisements from various mattresses.
I've had something like that too. Yeah, right. I've had something like that too.
Yeah, I think what is happening now, we have to be savvy. Give a simple example. When I go to my supermarket, I give my phone number. It's called bonus savings. Why do I give my phone number? I get $1 of strawberries, or I buy 2 strawberries, get 1 blueberry box free, or I get a few dollars of shaving cartridges. Here, I exactly know what I'm giving, what I'm getting. But in many other cases, we don't know. We know what we give, but we don't know how it can be, propagated everywhere, right? A few years ago, every time I went to the parking lot at 5 p.m., it will say, oh, time to home is 42 minutes. I said, hey, machine, why do you think? Because that's what I do. I don't go to bars. I don't go to pizza places. I leave home, and I leave work. I go home. So it's a very predictable thing, right? So AI will do these sorts of things, but we have to be careful what we want to share. That's the important thing. If you are a doctor, therapist, like you say, I have to trust you, and I have to tell you everything, because then you may be able to help me.
Right.
If I don't tell you something, then you are connecting dots based on your experience and so forth, and that's not the perfect thing. So trustworthy. That's why we have the title trust. So I have to trust you that you are helping me. So I have to be upfront with you, right? Then only you can give me good advice to make me better, to mend me in some ways.
Yep.
So with these big social platforms, it's all in fine print. Even when you do Google, Gmail, when you do Facebook and so forth, or Twitter, or TikTok and so forth, I mean, you have to assume anything that you give them is probably there everywhere. You have to assume, despite, the best that companies can do. Apple now did something recently, right? They said they won't let some social platforms track, what you do with Apple iPhone. Apple will actually ask you, iPhone, do you want the tracker thing or not? You say no, then Facebook won't know what you are ordering from Apple iPhone and things like that. So we do have these kinds of checks and balances. I think it's getting better because people are more conscious now. As you say, you're suddenly shocked that it is saying, oh, you are going to like this because you did that. That's a recommender system. I mean, Netflix does it to you all the time. Sometimes it's useful to you because you may not know that movie and it may be a fun movie to watch. Then you may thank it. But the question whether somebody else should be there to kind of make a guess about you based on what you have given, that's what prediction systems do. If all prediction systems from statistics, you have the output as a function of a lot of inputs, and then you find a relationship, and then you give the new inputs, it will tell you what the output is. So AI deep learning is basically a hierarchical nonlinear regression model. So it can capture the information that it has been given and try to make predictions. It may be right sometimes, it may not always be right. I think it cannot make strict behavior, very accurate behavior. These are all guesses. Let me ask you, suppose it makes a wrong prediction, you're going to just shrug your shoulders and say, it's a stupid machine and walk away. But in real situations like you are dealing with your people, it's real. So I always tell them that trust is very important. So if you trust the AI you are working with, then it's not going to do any harm. But if you're not sure of it, then you should be careful what you tell. It's just we have to be savvy now. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then something that we consistently talk about is essentially echo chambers online, where you have AI kind of like feeding you information that you're most likely or you're prone to sort of look at or search through. So we had Chris Boutte on from the Rewired Soul podcast, and he essentially spoke about going on YouTube and looking at like counter videos, like right wing sort of whatever I would call it propaganda, but let's say right wing pundits and kind of podcasts or whatever. And as he's going through YouTube and he's looking through all these videos, all of a sudden now he gets like Russell Brand recommendations. He gets Ben Shapiro recommendations. So all of a sudden his feed just turns into something other than what it was, which doesn't really make much sense, because if we're thinking about polarization and how awful it's been, I'm wondering how it's been the case for whatever it's 5-10 years at this point, how it's been the case that essentially all we're getting fed is exactly what we're looking for, because that kind of feeds into confirmation bias. So what could we do to combat some of that?
But Alex Leon, this is not new. You should read a book called The Founding Brothers or something like that. William Safire wrote decades ago. He was covering the period John Adams and Thomas Jefferson and so on. They were providing false information about many competing. There have been nasty presidential campaigns before, right? But they were all from the press. Right? This is a few sheets of pages and so on. It didn't have the speed. It didn't have the broad connectivity that we have now, right? If you put something weird on the Facebook, or immediately it gets multiplied, propagated likes, and this and that. So it's a human thing. I think what I like to say is, should we blame AI? AI is a technology, and humans, unfortunately, we are pretty good at taking a good technology and using it for bad purposes. So what happens here is that, people have certain kinds of feelings about some issues, and they want to, keep emphasizing that. That's why we have this group of people who just watch CNN, and a group of people watch MSNBC, and some watch Fox, and we are all in our thing. And what AI, it's not really AI, it's the fact that we have a fast network, we have a fast platform, computing things, and which can, imagine in the example I mentioned in the earlier campaign, somehow if they can print everything just like that and throw 1 billion sheets of those things all across the country, misinformation would have also spread much faster. So it's not. I feel like AI is getting blamed for what humans are doing in some sense, because we are also part of it, right? We should be smart enough, educated, and see, not trust everything that is put in front of us. Do a verification, and then sometimes ask our own beliefs. We are capable of self-examination. We are capable of self-examination. We can also ask, gee, am I doing this right? Or should I reset? Should I pull back? So all those things, if we do, then this misinformation stuff will kind of go. I think there are things about deep fakes, GAN, generative adversarial network generate. We are actually working on some of those problems. For example, I have, my colleagues develop algorithms that will say whether this is real Alex Leon or these are just human avatars talking to me. Whether it is a face is generated by a GAN or it's a real face. There are algorithms. There are a program from DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, called Semantic Forensics, Semaphore, where we look for inconsistencies between text and the accompanied image, like Twitter feeds and so forth. Like the example we give, we have children with balloons, ice creams, and moms, and so on. The picture, the post says a violent crowd is in front of Capitol Hill and this thing. So that is not right. Some of these are easily seen, but attacks are subtle. They're getting subtle, more and more subtle, and algorithms are delaying now. So, I think this is another challenge we have in the adversarial attack thing, how to do misinformation. But to get to the original point, I think we have to develop trustworthy AI systems. Okay, that's extremely important. And what do I mean by trust? It should work anywhere, everywhere. Right? If it doesn't work wherever, everywhere, then some people are not going to like it. It should not have any bias against any group of people or any, so bias and fairness in AI is very important. It should be interpretable. I should be able to understand how it reached this decision. It should be resilient, not fall apart when somebody attacks it. And it should protect our ethics, our privacy, and all of that. If all of these are put together when we design AI systems, then I think it will be a much better place for us to work with AI.
Right. Absolutely. And in terms of facial recognition, I know that it's way ahead of where it used to be when it was first developed. But I know that some of the problems, especially from reading your book, is that there's sort of biases in the sense that maybe Native Americans or certain minorities, maybe in terms of facial recognition, there's some percentage of the time that their faces aren't accurately captured. What's being done to sort of increase the accuracy? Because I know it's not inherent to AI. It's just that it just has to do with the technology essentially, and just a matter of developing it. But
no, that's a great question, and it's an important question.
Yeah.
My first summary statement is any technology that doesn't work for everybody should be looked at very carefully, and we need to fix it, right? Because you don't want to upfront, even get there. Now, in the case of face recognition, we tested our own systems that we built when I was at Maryland and so on to see if there is any bias to skin tone, any bias to gender. Okay, we tested. There was another technique already available. It's called MINE, Mutual Information Neural Estimation, which is useful to check the features that a deep learning network generates to see, does it behave well for men and women? And we saw our system, it was not. It was having a clear bias, did very well for men compared to females. And then we also checked skin tone. We saw the same thing. So what we did, there are two options. We could throw our face recognition system, start fresh, because when we started this, we didn't know that this would happen. Or we can take the best performing face recognition system and try to analyze how much bias does it have to each one of these things. Can I retrain it? Adversarial training. Can I do some knowledge distillation methods? These are standard machine learning methods. And we have shown in our papers, you can actually reduce bias and not lose much on performance. See, there's an interesting trade-off between bias and performance. Sometimes a bias system does very well. Okay, because on that population, the data it has seen. But another thing we noticed, if we train using very, very large number of identities, like 3.5 million, which we have recently finished in collaboration with a company, those features seem to be able to generalize well across demographies and so forth. So, but I think we have to still remember, while we talk about AI, the current AI is driven by data. So if you don't do properly how we get the data and curate the data and learn properly from it, it'll have bias. Statistics 101 says when the data is corrupted by noise, things can go wrong. So it's not surprising to us, but the point is we cannot accept bias is fine. No, we got to go and we have to explain to people. Sometimes when we develop algorithms, we can give a set of conditions where this algorithm should not be used. because, algorithms can fail sometimes, if the input is very noisy. If I want to do a face detection, a face recognition algorithm, if I don't detect a face, how can I do it, right? So we first look at, hey, am I detecting a face? How confident am I? Then only I go and try to verify for access control and so forth, right? So we have to do all of those things. But this bias thing is important. One of my distinguished friends at the Caltech, Professor Pietro Perona, has done a lot of work on this, really understanding where this is coming from, how should be handled. But my response to people, an AI algorithm can be probed and fixed. Right? Most technologies, when they are first introduced, have some issues. Take 737 MAX. Boeing is the best company in the world building great planes, airplanes. But something was not right with 737 MAX. We had some crashes. It was taken off the FAA schedules. They fixed it. I just flew in one 2 weeks ago. I was not worried. So technology has to be continuously improved and so on. But the bottom line, any technology that doesn't work for everybody in the society, immediately you got to grab it and fix it.
Yeah. And it makes you really wonder with something like a Facebook. I wonder why hasn't that been resolved? Because I mean, from the way we're talking about it is it doesn't seem like it's a major issue. And I still don't really understand what the actual benefits are for a company like Meta, Facebook, whatever you want to call it, for them, for the polarization, for just pumping out groups and particular articles that are most likely to be read. Like, what's the point of that?
I think their business model is to have more people stay with them. Whatever makes, but I mean, I'm not taking sides versus people and these social platforms. We as human beings, we can evaluate these things. We don't have to respond to things that agitate. We have control over that, right? Despite whatever our political leanings are, there are certain fundamental truths in democracy, and we will accept that. Everybody has to accept that. Then there's an issue. So I'm not punting the question. We see the impact of these things in our democracy. I'm grateful I was born and raised in a democratic country till age 23. And I'm grateful I'm living in a democratic country and so till my last breath. And that's a beautiful thing, but it is challenged. But we have to take control of it. We cannot blame, I don't think, we can blame social media, and I accept that because they provide a means. As I said, what could not happen in 1790, whatever, that the period that William Safire handled in the book, because they were all spreading bad information about each other through printed media. And, maybe at that time, we didn't even have Louisiana in our union, I think, right? There were only probably 13 East Coast things. So it didn't spread as fast. Now it's spreading faster. But the human nature for doing these sorts of things has been there forever. So if we care enough about our country, our democracy, then we have to be careful about what information we digest and what we are willing to, promote and so on. So responsibility rests with us, as well as with the social media platforms. And they are coming under scrutiny. I think there is this 230 thing that is constantly mentioned, right? Whether some action should be taken. If somebody writes nasty stuff on that, should we put the social media platforms as responsible for it, how much it is, and so forth. Again, this gets into the free speech issue. It's a complex issue. But to answer your question, social media likes to have me on their platform. As I have Facebook account, no Twitter, no TikTok. I want to just understand what that is. So years ago, I became a member. I asked my son, can I be your friend? He said, yeah, sure. And then I asked my daughter, can I be your friend? She said, absolutely not. And then my son said, be careful what you post on Facebook. Once in a while, you may say like, or put a picture of something nice, but don't say anything other than that, So I follow that religiously. Once somebody mentioned something about their student defending a thesis, and just as a reaction, I said, I think this was done in 1980 or something similar, because that's what we kind of do, right? If you have seen professors, my son got so upset. The way you should not have said that, because that professor was appreciating his students' work and you kind of threw cold water. I said, no, I just said, something like this has been done before, so they can take a look at it and make their thing better. So you see, even a simple thing like that, a kind of reaction, right? So if we are all in our own corners and want to believe what we have is the right thing to do, yeah, social media platforms are making it run faster, enabling, and so forth. But we have a choice. We have control over it. So let's exercise that control, that judgment. So this won't be, more dangerous than it has to be.
Right.
I agree. Honestly, I mean, we've definitely discussed this on the show before, but of course, those companies are going to maximize, or I should say, optimize for time on site, right? Things that are just going to feed those dopaminergic urges, keep you there on the site, and this is an interest to them and their shareholders, and of course, but at the same time, I agree with you. The responsibility falls on us to use our critical thinking to understand that there's nuance. It's not black and white. If you hear just one aspect of a particular story or one particular perspective, you shouldn't just take that immediately. Maybe look at what the other side is, try to maybe integrate it. Maybe there's a third option, a fourth option, 10 options more, and integrate all of that and then come up with some sort of an answer as opposed to just, taking what's given to you immediately. Yeah.
Not to be funny, but what if we all decide, entire country for 3 months, all we will respond in social platform only if they play Star Spangled Banner and America the Beautiful. Suppose if the moment you don't play it, I'm going to check out. Suppose if all of us, 320 million people, tell Twitter and TikTok and Facebook and whichever platform, those are the only things I want to listen to. If you don't have it, I'm checking out. You know what? Their model will start playing those songs 24/7.
Yeah.
So what do you do? So basically, we are feeding it and it's feeding us back. So
I mean, I also think what you're saying is that responsibility is shared, that it's on us, but it's also on these companies too.
Yes. I think they kind of know because the 230 comes all the time mentioned and so on. They're nervous about that. So I think they do have people. In fact, I've heard that in some elections in other foreign countries, they were very able to quickly go and remove the false information and things like that. And we hear they're also doing it in US. I mean, we removed this many, that many, and so forth. Sometimes they ban people from their platforms and so on. It's kind of a balance between their revenue and who provides them the clicks. So let's try this radical idea of checking into Facebook only when they play these songs and see what happens. Maybe Facebook will just play them all the time.
I love that. And
I'm just also curious, since we're on this topic, what kind of advances are there maybe in the realm of education in regards to AI? Because maybe there could be revolutions there.
I agree. I'm so glad you asked this, and I've been an educator for 42 years, and I really like that as my contribution. AI can surely help. In fact, years ago, when we were at a panel, somebody asked me, "What is your moonshot?" I said, "I want one physical teacher and 30 AI teachers in the class, so that every student can be catered to." What happens in a classroom? The teacher looks at the middle. The people who are extremely smart, they're somewhere here, and the people who are having difficulty, they're here, and the teacher cannot address everybody's needs. There is actually a National Science Foundation Institute, AI Institute, that primarily focuses on how AI can help education. So there are usual things we can do. For example, if you write a little prose, I mean, it corrects and this and that. I mean, that's not the thing. I'm more interested in how AI can help students with learning disabilities. Because it'll have more patience than a teacher, and it can repeatedly sit with you, and it doesn't, take bathroom breaks, and it doesn't have to cook anything. It's there all the time. And how we can use AI to help students with learning disabilities. And there are many kinds of, I'm not an expert on that, so that is something that will be useful. And we can also go beyond, interestingly, I tell my students, I say, when I was a graduate student, we didn't have iPad, we didn't have Google. So every Friday afternoon, I'll take a bag of quarters and walk over to the library and take the books and Xerox and Xerox and Xerox. And, because that's the only thing we had. But now everything is available. So AI can summarize things for them, what to learn, where to learn, and those sorts of things. Help them to learn better, help them to learn quicker. As you know, every generation that comes, it's better than the previous generation in terms of some aspects of learning. So AI, please take a look at that AI Institute for Education, National Science Foundation. It's a fairly large grant. Educators and AI working together. And I have some colleagues at Hopkins who are also looking into that topic. It is very useful. So those are the places where I want to focus on: AI helping education, AI helping people with disabilities, vision, right? When I was at Maryland, I supervised 3 undergraduate groups, honors groups, for building devices that people who are low vision or vision impairment can use to navigate from building A to building B, or enter into a room and see who are all there and what kind of emotional status, their faces are, or indoor navigation and so on. So there is that kind of a thing. Or when Alexa is given what is known as a deaf speech, that is, people who are, deaf can't also talk very well. Their accent is slightly different. So you can help them to communicate better. So AI can kind of get into these sorts of things. So I tell people, let's not worry about AI becoming a monster and taking us with it. Let's work about all these areas. It's very important. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that one of the more important questions that we can ask is, so even though these are not deep fakes, how can we stop or prevent ourselves from being catfished on dating apps?
Gee. I think we have to educate our children. We have to, I know there was this recent unfortunate incident. I think warnings have to be given. My niece, when she was 3-year-old, had her own iPad.
Yeah.
But then when we have to provide controls on it and so forth, so that bad things don't get into her device and so forth. And as parents, we got to be watching our children. When they come home, they're doing homework, and it's okay to ask them, what are they reading? And of course, they don't tell you anything. My kids, when they want to, how is school? Oh, everything is fine. Every day. Oh, yeah, school is okay. So, but with such a prolific availability of information of all kinds coming to children and even adults and so forth, we have to be informed. We have to help them. For example, before, I used to get so many emails, saying, even today, sometimes I get these emails that, oh, somebody left $100 million, I don't know what to do with it. If only you give me your bank account, I'm going to put 50 million into it. People still fall for it. People still fall for it and lose money. So we have to be aware. So that's the one thing I'm now realizing. We have to be, as technology gets savvy, we have to be savvier.
Yeah.
So we understand, because some other human will be misusing the technology. So the technology, by technology, when it is created, it doesn't say, oh, I'm going to do all these nasty things to these people. No, some other human is using the technology to do nasty things. So we have to also scale our skills, and we have to be aware. Yeah.
So Alan, the next time a supermodel hits me up on the dating app, you're going to talk me out of it?
No, I'll encourage you to have a conversation and see what that AI bot says
to talk about political divisiveness on Facebook.
But actually,
that bot will get bored and will not bother you again.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
Upside.
I'd sing Star Spangled Banner.
Yeah.
And so there are certain figures in society, like, for example, take a Elon Musk or a Sam Harris, who have had sort of a really pessimistic view of AI. And if I remember correctly, and I really do not remember this well because I used to be a little more well-versed in this before, but I believe they have something with a problem with what kind of information is being fed to developing AIs, and we're not necessarily teaching it to be good, and where's the regulation and that sort of thing. But then there are other figures I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. Hopefully, maybe you are. There's a Dr. Ben Gertzfeld. I believe he serves. He works at or he's the CEO at Hanson Robotics, mainly based in China. He has such a beautiful, optimistic view of where we're going to be with AI in the future, and the things that we're going to be able to accomplish, and futurists like Jason Silva. And I honestly, I mean, I don't. I mean, I may be biased, but I do feel like, I mean, as long as we can sort of take precaution and just sort of guide the AI and have certain regulation in place, we can have a beautiful, optimistic version of the future. But what are those fears that like those other figures have?
Yeah, I think the reality is somewhere in between. It's not, I always say, don't be afraid of AI. See how you can use it for making your life better. I think, you know, there are more things like this coming up now. I have seen that the former Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, gave a talk at a meeting in National Cathedral Man-Machine Guard that AI could be more dangerous than nuclear weapons and things like that. And Elon Musk has made statements about AI's potential power to be bad. And Stephen Hawking, you know, Nobel laureate, a well-renowned physicist, a brilliant mind, has said similar things. I think when people ask, okay, your question, you have a question as a title in your book, can we trust AI? So what is your answer? I say a qualified yes. It's a great technology. It'll get better. And then, you know, we can, but we have to watch it like we watch all technologies. And the thing I like to say, AI does not lie. If it is biased, it will tell you, I'm sorry, I'm biased. We can fix it. But humans, it's very hard to figure out. Even though if they're biased, they're not going to tell you. So I like to, I always say, an AI bias, I can probe, I can quantify, I can mitigate. And I'm not sure if a human has a bias, the person may not even know the person has a bias, and how to, you know, how to tell them. I mean, when children are born, they don't have any bias. I don't think we're pre-wired to be biased about anything, but they learn something from their surroundings and so forth, and they go one way or other. And some people are, you know, most people are fine. So I don't worry about this, you know, things that it could go rogue. Actually, the CEO of FTX, I think you mentioned, right? I heard in the news that they have invested a lot of money on companies just to make sure AI won't become bad. I mean, I saw some $530 million over the years, and some of those companies are worried because of bankruptcy. Maybe they may have to give the money back or something like that. If you personally ask me, I say, my God, maybe we could have used that money to build newer schools and buy computers for more people, or build community centers and promote peace and, you know, and everything. So that would have been my choice. But you know, when somebody has lots of money, you know, we don't know how they think. I wish I had $140 billion, and then I'll find out how I'm going to react to things and so on. But remember what I said before, the current AI that is based on data is not going to give totally weird things outside what that data already has. It just cannot, by definition, by the way we teach it, but it cannot. Unless there is a new form of AI that comes that can just transcend everything it has been told and think weird stuff, humans are capable of doing. That's how human invention comes. Human creativity is need not constrained by what we have been told in the classroom. Right? Otherwise, you know, what we would still be doing Model T. Even for Model T, we had to jump from horse carriage to Model T. It's not like we put additional horse or we put 4 wheels on a horse carriage. No, for Model T, we just went the other way, right? We went to steam. So that kind of jump we can do. And it's a clear indication that we were not constrained by what we have been taught, what we have been, you know, how we have been trained. Right now, the data-driven AI, it will stay within the realm of data that it has been given, it has learned. It's basically deep learning is a nonlinear regression model, hierarchical nonlinear regression model. It can do some new predictions, but it cannot go out and do crazy things. So I don't worry about this. Everybody is entitled to their views about a technology, and we have been wrong before. Like when steam engine first came, everybody said cows will stop giving milk. Please check it out. It is there.
Wow.
Yeah, and cows are still giving milk. So
Wow. Yeah.
so I think to me, the question like this and so on are something that we should keep in mind, because we are humans. We are capable of thinking. Right? So
Yep.
we should think about it. But I say, don't be scared of AI. Work with AI. If you work with AI, it'll get better. Yeah.
For sure. And actually taking things like, for example, Moore's law into account. I mean, this may be an interesting question to ask, but let's see where this goes. Where do you think realistically, maybe, I don't know, let's say in maybe a span of perhaps maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, where we might be with AI, taking into account how we just keep advancing so quickly with the technology.
Yeah. I think what we are all realizing, at least in computer vision, we cannot simply annotate our life. Because label data, right? That's what we need to train these deep learning networks. Because take traffic cameras, there are thousands of them. We work with them for figuring out how many cars are waiting at an intersection, how many are taking this turn, that turn. Is there an anomaly? Some car is stranded in the side of the road, and so on. These cameras work when the sun is there, and they produce tons of data. So I can't go and annotate every one of them. I get a little bit of data, and I hope it all works there. So where AI is going now is what we call a self-supervised learning. Can we learn from data, large amount of data, without getting that information, the mapping information? This is Rama, and this is his face. Without that, I just give lot of faces and faces and faces, and then somehow it learns what a face should be. There's actually a very classical method, which is unsupervised method, known as principal component analysis, which has been there from 1932. And one of my friends, a distinguished scientist at MIT, made it a workable system in the early 90s, eigenfaces and so on. It doesn't require labels. Once it understands what a face representation is, you can give your face, Alex, and then some other, face taken at some other time, it will, produce features, and then it will match and so forth. So it will be doing. So self-supervised learning. I don't know if my example is right. Let me try it anyway, and you tell me what you think of it.
Sure.
Outside my building in a Clark Hall at the Hopkins campus, Homewood campus, a gentleman comes with his dog. He sits on the chair in the bench. He'll throw a ball. The dog, before it wants to fetch the ball, it kind of takes a side look and see if he's really throwing. It has learned over the years. Maybe sometimes he just does that and doesn't throw, maybe. Who knows? And then I asked him, why is it's only at the distance of 17 feet, 18 feet, 19? Why doesn't it just go all the way to 50 feet? So I said, I want to do an experiment where I want you to throw so that the ball is at 5 feet. And I want to know how many trials does it take for the dog to figure out it doesn't have to go to 17 feet. He says, oh, no, anytime I stand up, he'll go 35 feet.
Wow.
Interesting.
Do I have now a robot that can do these things? I don't know, maybe, but I have to look at it. It's not an interesting thing commercially, but this made me think. So there are, these things, our good old friend, a dog can kind of figure out our pattern and so forth. And nobody really, sometimes we teach them, but it's not clear how they're processing this data and came to the conclusion. The person stands up, then it's going to be much farther. They figured out, right? So it's a form of self-supervised learning, because there's no time to annotate that, if this man stands up, it's 35 feet, if he sits, it's 17 feet, and so on. Anyway, yeah, I mean, this example, I kind of like to give as an example of self-supervised learning, but data is coming like a deluge, and we don't have time to annotate all of them. So we can train using some annotated data, and then we have to let loose. So that's where it's going to be effective. Sometimes, so the question here is how much annotation you have and how much the big one is. It could be 10, 90, 20, 80, whatever. It can happen, but self-supervised learning is the one that is going to be useful. In medicine, we don't have a lot of data. Data collection is becoming, for some specific diseases, is difficult. So how to learn from small data. So the title of the talk I recently gave is, how to learn on your own and with less data. Okay. So as you put more domain expertise, maybe we can rely less and less on data and so forth. And then and also the other thing that is happening is synthetic data. It's purely artificial data. I can just generate faces, using computer models. Can I use them to train my system? There's no privacy issue because I'm not taking, Alex's face or Leon's face, and I'm just, taking a synthetic face.
Sure.
So it's becoming more and more prevalent, how to use synthetic data as a data augmentation to teach AI system and so forth. So these are, I think, the things that will happen. I think more and more deployable systems with AI we can see across the sectors. Health, FDA has already approved close to 120 things depending on AI for various situations. Smart transportation, and so on. So it's going to, and even reducing the impact of misinformation is one thing, and so forth. So I think it's going to be good. AI, it's going to be good. I don't worry about the fact that it's going to become bizarre.
So
I'm also curious if we'll ever have it in our bodies, in the sense that maybe not just like nano machines, let's say, in our bodies, like monitoring our health. And I don't know, this might be too sci-fi, maybe too much, but it would be interesting. Maybe, I don't know, if there was some sort of a system that maybe told you things about your body, made certain recommendations. Even in fact, when maybe if you were given a certain piece of information, it can either fact check it or maybe advise, no, wait, maybe check out this other
By the
article.
way, man, just FYI, now you're getting into Elizabeth Holmes territory, because that's what she wanted to do. She wanted to have like this chip that people carried with them, and essentially it like diagnosed them. It gave them health
Theranos
recommendations. What?
Is that the
Theranos, yeah. But it was a little bit
It was more
different.
with
But
blood
so,
tests.
but this is a different. I don't even know if she patented, but this was a different technology where it was
Sure.
literally like not, it wasn't Velcro. It was like some sort of pad that you placed on your arm, and this pad essentially carried all of your data, and it gave you early diagnostics. That's purportedly, right? And so the idea was it would inject different medications into you when you needed them, right? So this is, I mean, at this point, at least stuff of complete sci-fi here.
Yeah,
But
I
who
think
knows?
type 2 diabetes people have an insulin pump.
Right.
Right. I think even type 1 diabetes probably need that, and it can measure your A1C and kind of suggest. Yeah, I think some of those have to be very well understood problems. AI works well now when the mapping between data and the label is unambiguous. The moment there are some ambiguities in this, then it requires more knowledge and common sense. So that is where it may make a mistake. So if there is a very well understood thing, if A1C is greater than this, then maybe we need to pump this much of insulin into the body. I think the people already have it. I've heard that the insulin pumps operate that way. Or sometimes it may just constantly give a small dose or something like that. I have to check on that. So yeah, I mean, those things are possible. I think Apple Watch gives you a few things like that, and the Fitbit and so on. I don't know how much of AI is in those things, but we can expect to see more and more. For example, for senior citizens, fall prevention alerts, that are useful. And you can do it by looking at their gait, their posture, walking pose, and all that stuff. So those things are possible. But remember, all of these have to be cleared by FDA. Right? If you do anything to the person, you can't just put a little chip inside.
Yeah.
And I excuse me, the students cannot expect to have a chip in their head so they don't have to study and go and get all the A's in the exams. No, that's not happening, right?
Right.
So I think selective things will happen like that. And again, this will be a way to improve. But what I feel is that years ago, when I had a high school kid, I told one of the kids to use deep learning to figure out the calories based on the food they have. So he went and took pictures of all these McDonald's things, French fries, Coke, and various Big Macs, take a picture, and he will automatically determine this is a large fry, this is a large Coke, this is a Big Mac. And then there's calorie information available. It's always about, I don't know, whatever number of calories. So, that can be fed actually to the computer algorithm, that we might have in our, iPad or in our cell phone or whatever. And it can tell you, maybe what you had a little too much for lunch, maybe you should eat a salad for dinner.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things are actually possible, especially will be helpful for diabetes people, because they are the ones who have to really monitor the blood sugar and the diet. Right.
Yeah.
So these are helpful things that can happen. It all depends on what the market is. Drug companies will produce a product only if there's a large enough market for it. But as a research problem, as a experimental thing, all of these are possible, and they will continue to happen in the health side, medicine side. And big hospitals now have specific units devoted to AI. I think so they are seeing the importance of this and so forth. And at Hopkins, we have a platform known as PMAP, Precision Medicine Analytic Platform, which can keep all the data safely. And then you can run the AI algorithms on that to figure out what the issue is and so forth. Personalized medicine, that is possible now.
I love that. So yeah, and let's end it off on such a hopeful note. So Alan, final questions for Rama before we head out?
Yes, if we wanted to follow your work, and of course buy the book, where can we do that?
Well, I am not on, I'm on Facebook, but not on Twitter or TikTok. I have a lab at Hopkins. It's called AIM at .jhu.edu, AIEM, AI for engineering and medicine. I'm interested in both engineering and medicine. And you see my website, and usually professors' websites, have the papers and the students and who are in the lab. But I have already uploaded one link for a podcast I had before. And when your thing becomes a link, I will put it up there. So if people visit my website, they can listen to all your wonderful questions. And I hopefully I answered some of them well.
Yeah,
and so they can see that. So I think they will gain. I actually, somebody, my friend, Professor Pietro Perona, this morning sent me an email after listening to my podcast on Coleman Hughes' conversation. And he said, Rama, I heard you, I was pleasantly surprised, but these are some things, that is happening in the case of bias and face recognition. I thought, yeah, I agree. And, he and I agree that we are saying AI bias can be measured and mitigated.
Very interesting.
People should know that, so then they won't be afraid.
Yeah.
Right.
And also, just before we wrap up, guys, if you want to purchase the book, you can use code HAI30 for 30% off of, obviously, the book called Can We Trust AI when you order from Hopkins Press. And so to order, you can visit press.jau.edu/books and enter HAI30 at checkout. So
and
Rama,
I'll include a link to that also in the description.
Yeah, we'll have a link up. Rama, again, thank you so much. This was such an excellent episode.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Leon, Alex. I really enjoyed talking to you, gentlemen, and have a great day. And thanks for having me on the show. I really want to push this idea of telling the social platform that we will listen to you only you played some of these songs we like, and see how much time it takes for them to kind of go back, and then everybody will say, "Oh my God."
Yeah, I love that.
I hope so.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
talk to you soon.
Take care.
Absolutely.
Yeah. By the way, I didn't even know what time it was. I was just like, oh, okay, we're ending. All right.
Yeah.
All right. So again, if you want to follow us, you can follow us at Seize the Moment Podcast on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter. We're at Seize_podcast. Like, subscribe,
hit the bell on YouTube.
And thank you again so much for watching. Happy to be back, and see you all next time.